For PTC TV, I'm Graham Lynch from CommsDay, and we're speaking with David Nishball, who's the President of Enterprise Services for Bharti Airtel. Welcome.
Thanks, Graham.
Well, Bharti Airtel's probably best known as a mobile phone provider. That's how it's internationally known. But you head up the Enterprises division. Can you tell us a bit more about Enterprises and how that fits into the overall company?
You're correct. Bharti Airtel is one of the largest mobile operators in the world. We're actually the largest private operator for both mobile and other services in India. And globally, we rank now third largest single country mobile operator in the world. But enterprise services still represents about 25% of the overall company revenue, and enterprise services focuses on two things: on corporates and carriers. Enterprise service provides the full range of services, both mobile services, fixed line services, data services, satellite services, to large corporates and carriers around the world.
Okay. Now, we've seen a number of Indian companies get very aggressive in the global space in recent years, companies such as Reliance and Tata Communications. What's Bharti's, I guess, unique selling point against those companies? What makes you different, and what recommends Bharti to a customer over those other companies?
Yeah, I think Bharti is very much focused as being an India-centric player. That doesn't mean that we only operate in India, but we primarily operate between India to the world and the world to India. Within India, we provide the largest portfolio of services. We're the only operator that has a number one or number two position in every single segment we operate, whether it be mobile services, fixed line voice, private line services, MPLS services, and also we are the largest VSAT operator in the country. So we have the largest portfolio in India, and we think our primary differentiator is our India capabilities. Our deep reach in India, over 80,000 route kilometers of fiber cable, over 1,000 points of presence across country, over 75,000 base stations, where we also offer our WiMAX service to provide local access diversity for our customers. So we think our India depth, our India reach is our primary strategic asset. And so we're in a position where we can really partner with carriers around the world, because we're also not competing with those carriers in their own backyard. Our real mission is to provide easy access for Indian customers to all of their partners around the world, and really providing the best partnership opportunity for carriers around the world to access India.
Okay, now you've introduced some very interesting partnerships in recent months, one with Airtel and another one with PACnet. Can you tell us a bit more about those partnerships and what they bring to Bharti?
Yeah, I think both of those partnerships are indicative of the approach that we launched last year at the PTC, which we called India with Airtel. And again, it builds on that strength that we have of being the strongest player within India and not having major conflicts in markets outside India. So we offered to carriers a full range of opportunities, everything from infrastructure services to a carrier that may have its own operating licenses in India, to services for carriers who don't have operating licenses in India, who want to extend their capability, their BN capability for their Indian customers, to have resale services for customers that basically have limited requirements within India and don't want to get into any of the hassles of regulatory licenses and so forth. These two fall really into the second category. Both Airtel and PACnet have tremendous capabilities outside India, but don't hold the primary ILD and NLD licenses within India. So we extend our capabilities, meet them through NNI on the MPLS services. In the case of PACnet, also offering end-to-end private line services in cooperation with them, serving both the Asia and the US markets. But it's a good example of how we can extend our own capabilities through partners and offer those partners unique access to customers in India without conflicting with them in their home markets.
Okay. Now, in the past few days, you've announced a major initiative in international toll-free services. Can you tell us a bit more about that, and what's the attraction of that market at this particular point of time?
Yeah. I think toll-free service is actually a relatively underdeveloped market in India. The India regulatory environment for many years did not permit a very competitive offer of voice service into India. That's because there was a regulatory requirement for a subsidy to the local operator on all inbound voice minutes. As of October 1st of this last year, that subsidy's gone away. So now rates into India on the voice side are among the most competitive in the world. That means that in the past, companies that were operating in the services sector that may have had to buy their own private lines, build their own voice networks, run their own voice over IP for call center and other usages, now can actually return back to the public network. So a whole range of toll-free services, domestic toll-free services, international toll-free services are being introduced by Bharti Airtel to serve that ITES sector, which no longer has to go out and build these capabilities on their own.
Okay. I'd like to turn our attention to the submarine cable sector, which is always a great interest here at PTC. Last year, Bharti Airtel announced its participation in a consortium with some interesting carriers and also Google to build a cable across the Pacific. Can you tell me more about that project and why specifically are you working with Google on it?
All right. I think the primary motivation for us is that we have a large and growing IP market of our own. We've been building out our global network to serve our own organic traffic requirements. And because we're the largest operator within India, because we're operating in a market which is growing at over 100% per year in terms of bandwidth, we have a tremendous need moving out into the future for bandwidth between India and the US market. Because of where India is located strategically, we're almost exactly halfway around the world from the US. So we're building capacity in both directions, from India across the Pacific and from India across the Atlantic to the US. Across the Pacific, that's why we entered into this particular consortium. We're going to be, the Unity cable will offer traffic between, or capacity between Japan and the US West Coast, which will help complete the link that we have of our fiber optic network around the world, linking India to Singapore, up through Asia to Japan, to the US, and then additional cables that we're building across the European continent into the US as well.
Now, I wanted to ask about that. You're actually involved with two separate systems going west, the Europe-India Gateway and the India-Middle East-Western Europe cable. What's the thinking behind getting involved in two separate cables to Europe?
I think unlike some of the carriers that are really in the build cables and resell them business, we're in the business of building the capacity that we need for our own organic traffic requirements and then offering that to other carriers as required. So it makes a lot more sense for us to participate in a number of different consortiums and get more diversity across a number of different cable systems, since we don't generally intend to be a private cable operator of our own. Across the European route, of course, we've seen a number of cable cuts recently, and that demonstrates the vulnerability of that particular route. And CME4 now being at its maximum capacity, there's a need for additional capacity, between India and Europe and across from Europe to the US. So that's why we've invested in two different cable systems, providing us now with 3 redundant routes from Mumbai to Europe and beyond.
Okay. Well, on that note, we have to finish. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Graham.